Pro-life talk. Real world answers. This is Life Report.
Welcome to Life Report. I'm your host, Josh Brahm. We've got a very, very special guest with us today, Father Pavone. Let me introduce him to the, maybe few pro-life people that listen to our show that is not aware of who Father Pavone is. Father Frank Pavone is the National Director of Priests for Life and the Missionaries of the Gospel of Life. He's also the President of the National Pro-Life Religious Council and the Pastoral Director of the Silent No More Awareness Campaign and Rachel's Vineyard, which is one of the ministries that send a Right to Life of Central California, at least locally. Father Pavone is one of the most prominent pro-life leaders in the world. Ordained in 1988, he is a priest of the Amarillo Diocese and serves full-time in pro-life leadership with his bishop's permission. He travels throughout the country, this is my favorite part of his bio, to an average of 4 states a week. 4 states a week preaching and teaching against abortion. He produces pro-life television programs. He's written two books. Father Pavone, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's great to be with you, Josh, and thank you for doing this program. I've followed it for some time, and you do a great job.
Thanks so much for that. Scott Klusendorf noted recently that in this last election, we lost in the war of ideas, that we need to more effectively change people's minds, which will in turn change the way they vote. Father Pavone, what can we do to more effectively change people's minds?
Well, you know, I've always been convinced that we have to show people the evidence that leads to the conclusions that we espouse. For example, when we say abortion kills children, we know that that's true, but that's a conclusion. The evidence is when you hear a description of what the abortion procedure is, as described by those who do it. You can just read in the medical textbooks, for instance, or in the court testimony that they have given under oath, or when you see the actual pictures or video of what an abortion is, then there's no denying that the conclusion, namely abortion kills children, is true, because you see it's a child and you see what abortion does to the child. Now, this is just one of many examples, but we often assume in the church and in the pro-life movement that people are aware of what we're saying, and that's simply not the case. And results like this past election is more evidence that that's not the case.
Let me go to the election. I was on your website this last week, and I watched one of your most recent videos, and I was really impressed with something that you were talking. You gave kind of a very straight message on what happened in this last election, and you noted that there were a lot of Catholics that voted for President Obama. 42% of church-going Catholics. Give me a little bit of your sense. We did an episode about this recently that we're going to publish soon, but I'm curious about your sense. You've got, I think, a real finger on the pulse of the Catholic Church and the pro-life community. There are a lot of people that are wondering, like, why is it? It seems so obvious in the second election, how pro-abortion President Obama was. There were a lot of Protestants that didn't even vote, and there were some Catholics that still voted for President Obama. Why do you think that is?
Actually, it goes back to the incarnation, and this may sound like a strange way of answering this question, but we just celebrated Christmas, and it's about God getting himself mixed up with the things of humanity, starting by taking on himself a human body and a human soul. And then, of course, we know what he went through, especially on Calvary. Now, I start there as a reference point because I find that very often the church's response, and here again we're talking specifically about the Catholic Church, the response to the abortion problem and the response to our duty in elections tries to keep an arm's distance from things that are pretty messy and dirty, like politics. And what I mean is that I often observe among the clergy and others associated with the church this effort to sort of hint at what people need to do instead of telling them. And we say, well, we have to exercise faithful citizenship. Well, okay, we need to say that, and the church does say that, but what does that mean? And how are we going to get the people to do that? So what we propose at Priests for Life and what we help churches to do is to take it the next step and say, okay, here are the issues that matter the most. First and foremost, life. And sometimes in the church, people are afraid to prioritize those issues. And so we see them talking as if all the issues are equal. Well, of course they're not. You can't have the right to education if you're not alive.
Right.
And then the third thing is, take it the next step even further and say, all right, if life is the primary issue, together with all these other issues, which we always acknowledge, then where do the candidates stand on the issues? And tell your people in the congregation the names of the candidates and what their positions are. And then finally, seal the deal by putting voter registration forms in the church, letting people who aren't registered sign up after Mass, and then arrange transportation to the polling place. Now, this is a real program of action, and we're afraid to do it. We do step one, and then we stop.
Most of the pro-life community is, I think, still reeling from the election and what that means. And I've heard a lot of people, and I know that you're on social media too, so you see what a lot of kind of the grassroots pro-life people are saying and not just the leadership. And I see a lot of pro-life people making these kind of comments like the pro-life movement hasn't even accomplished anything in the last 40 years. And you've got a whole talk on this subject, so this would be very easy. Father Pavone, what has been the pro-life movement's greatest victory or victories so far?
Well, it's always in the lives that we save. We know that there have been over 53 million children killed by surgical abortion since Roe versus Wade. But the numbers would be astronomically higher were it not for the work of the pro-life movement, because we can count many of the lives that we have saved. For example, the pregnancy centers are the best at doing this. They know the women they have served, the babies that have come back in their arms saying, hey, I would have aborted this child if it weren't for you. We know those numbers, millions upon millions of children that were saved, but also the countless others that we cannot count because we do not know. So the first and most important accomplishment is that. And as I always say, all the effort, all the activity of the entire pro-life movement would be worth it if even just one single human life were saved as a result. Or even more, even if just one single life we tried to save, and even if we hadn't succeeded, this is what we mean by the incalculable value of even a single life. But of course, the movement has succeeded far more than that. And we've made tremendous inroads in educating people about what abortion is. We see that over these years, over these decades, in the shifting of public opinion in our direction, which it continues to move in our direction.
Okay, this is a tougher question, and it's one I've asked 9 or 10 pro-life leaders in the past on the show. This is kind of the opposite question. What has been the pro-life movement's greatest failings or weaknesses?
Well, there are two. One is what we were already saying about the activation of the churches. In other words, this separation between our faith life and where we have to apply it, whether it be in politics or in other ways that we fight the cultural battle. In other words, the victory in this whole pro-life battle is not just a matter of having the right position or even articulating the right position. The victory comes when we know how to engage this battle and have the courage to risk. That is a tremendous failure, especially within the church, the unwillingness to risk, the unwillingness to fight. To put it another way, so many people try to fit the battle into their life instead of changing their life to fit the battle. And that's what I would sum up in a nutshell as the greatest failure of God's people when faced with this abortion tragedy. And that really encompasses a lot of specific problems. Then, of course, the other thing is failing to act in unity. Now, unity doesn't mean everybody does the same thing. Everybody's not supposed to do the same thing. We all have unique vocations. But unity means reaching out to those who are doing different things for the same cause, getting to know each other, and figuring out ways of collaborating. That's why one of my key priorities in leading Priests for Life and the other organizations that I lead, it has been to connect people. We have strategic meetings, unity meetings, retreats. Much of this is behind the scenes. It doesn't get publicized for the very reason that its purpose is to unify the leaders rather than to make any public statement. But I can tell you it's bearing a great deal of fruit, but we have to do a whole lot more just to take the time to get to know what others in the movement are doing.
Well, you must be doing a good job, because I remember at the National Right to Life Convention in Nashville, someone was talking to me about you, and his comment to describe you was, there is no one that every pro-life group likes more than Father Pavone. This is the guy that nobody has any problems with. So whatever you're doing must be working. Let me ask you a quick follow-up going back to apathy. I agree this is one of the biggest problems. So what is your view on how we can try to overcome this huge obstacle of apathy?
Well, one of the things, first of all, we have to keep in mind is that God is going to give us victory here through a remnant. Now, Scripture talks about the remnant, and God brings salvation into the world through a remnant of his people. And we have to consider that he's very likely to do the same thing here. So first of all, it's not that we have to get everybody activated, probably not even a majority of people. We have to cultivate a faithful remnant, a relatively small group of people who nevertheless risk everything, like we were saying a moment ago, the need to risk, who give everything, for shaping their lives for the battle rather than the other way around, and coming together and staying in unity. This is going to be the formula. Now, how do we do that? It involves spiritual renewal, first of all, and some of what we do is precisely geared towards the spiritual renewal of people as they fight this battle. That's why we teach a whole spirituality of pro-life activism. There's the informational basis, the educational basis. There are the various tools and strategies and tactics. But undergirding it all, there's a particular spirituality. In other words, our faith doesn't only tell us that we have to be pro-life or why we have to be pro-life, it also tells us how. And we teach that spirituality. What are the different kinds of virtues we need in this battle? Once people begin to grasp that and connect it to the faith that they already have, then I think we have the formula for overcoming the apathy. The other thing I would say is that sometimes we just have to be shocked out of our apathy. And that's where, sometimes things will just happen without our planning them. For example, two high-profile cases I was involved in over not too many years ago were, of course, the Terry Schiavo case and the Baby Joseph case. Now, here were two people over whom there was a lot of fuss, a lot of fight, and a lot of media. But we jumped in the middle of those frays. More specifically, we were approached by those families asking for our help. But the point is, a lot of people were shocked that here we have an American citizen that we couldn't protect from starvation and dehydration. And here we have a baby that we almost couldn't save because all he needed was a simple tracheotomy. These things shock people. And I know from having been involved in both of those cases, many, many people got off the sidelines as those cases hit the news. They got off the sidelines and they said, you know what? This has gone too far. We've got to get involved in this pro-life movement. And then they said, show me how, teach me how. And they got involved.
Father Pavone, how would you recommend that pro-lifers interact with those who are pro-abortion choice?
Well, first of all, always with kindness and with a readiness to listen. Now, we know that there's no compromise. There's no middle ground between life and death. There's absolutely no way for pro-life and quote pro-choice, if it's a choice of abortion, to meet somewhere in the middle. That's not the point. Where we're meeting is not in the middle of those two positions. Where we're meeting is on the common ground of the humanity that both we and the person who disagrees with us share. So when I go to somebody who's on the other side of this issue, I ask them why. I say, first of all, I introduce myself. You want to start by exchanging names, because if the person's not even willing to give you their name, they're probably not going to be willing to engage in a really honest discussion. But, you make some kind of human contact and you say, okay, because basically what you're establishing at the outset is, do you really want to talk about this? Or do you just want to vent? If they really want to talk, you can make progress. You acknowledge them, and then you say, okay, I'm against abortion in all circumstances. And my position is pretty simple. You can never do it. Let me understand your position. What do you mean when you say you're pro-choice? Explain it to me. And then one of the most important lessons for us who have the truth and know we have the truth to learn is to be able to keep quiet. Let the other person speak. Listen to them. Not that you're expecting them to to convince you or change you, but that you're showing the respect, that you want to understand where they are. Because the more you understand about where they are, the more you're going to be able to lead them along to the fullness of the truth.
What single thing should pro-lifers be doing that most are not doing right now?
Well, I think first of all, we don't spend enough time reading and learning more about the issue, because the issue is more than, obviously it's more than slogans, it's more than just a basic understanding of some of the arguments back and forth. We constantly have to be nourishing and nurturing our own understanding of the issue. And we all know many people who are engaged in many kind of projects over and above their other daily responsibilities of work and family. And what often gets pushed to the side is time for study, time for reading. We should subscribe to some good pro-life emails. There's plenty of them out there. We send them out ourselves. Some good pro-life websites we should be in the habit of going to regularly. And there are constantly new pro-life books coming out. As you mentioned in my introduction, I've written 2 of them. I'm working on a third one now. Janet Morana, our executive director, just came out with a book called Recall Abortion. Fascinating take on this whole theme. The point is, we need to keep doing that. I think that's one of the most important things that all pro-lifers can do more of. And there's plenty of resources out there.
So let me ask you another opposite question. What single thing do pro-life people sometimes spend too much time doing because they could be doing something else that's more effective?
Well, sometimes we spend too much time lamenting. We talk to each other. We talk to each other about how bad it is, and you have to do a certain amount of that. But there's a lot of energy that we expend, really complaining about how bad things are. We look at how bad things are. We have to take a realistic assessment of that. But then, what happens then is that there's got to be a transformation of, first of all, if we're mentally healthy, okay, we're going to be angry when we see what's going on. Some people think it's a bad thing to make people angry. People accuse me of that all the time. So, if you say this, or you show these pictures, or you do that, you're going to upset people. Well, I say, any healthy person is going to be upset if they hear these things, that they're true. But then the thing that has to happen is this: we take that energy and we channel it into productive activity for the cause of life. Or the same thing is true if if we're sad or we're disappointed. If we just turn that inward, it turns into depression. But if we take that sadness and we say, Lord, my heart is broken, this is terrible, but here's where I begin. Show me what I have to do next. And that sadness and disappointment can turn into a whole new kind of energy that we then devote to this cause. But we have to respond, because otherwise it'll just cast us down and move us in the opposite direction of saying that we don't want to be involved.
Gabby's got a couple of questions that listeners have sent in that they wanted to make sure that we asked before the end of the interview. Go ahead.
Well, the first question comes from Patrick in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and he asked that given the election results, what do we most need to double down on? Politics, public education demonstration, educating the people in the pews, support pregnancy care centers, something else? And what would be the second most important thing?
Well, the election results, first of all, were not as bad as they seem. What I mean by that is some people try to interpret them as the American people rejecting everything that we stand for in the pro-life movement. That's not the case at all. This election, if it showed anything, it showed the American people are divided right down the middle. And it wasn't that many votes that would have shifted it the other way. So we have a deeply divided country. What we have to focus on certainly is activating the educated. I mean, we always have to do education. But we've got a lot of people who they're very clear and very convinced about where they stand. I think the primary focus has to be, okay, how do we activate? Again, going back to the idea of that remnant, we've got a faithful remnant of people. How do we activate them? In other words, take the disappointment they feel, the anger they experience, channel it into productive activity. And this means training seminars. This means recruitment. This means one-on-one encouragement. This means churches getting involved and setting up programs for activity. And then, of course, the second thing after that is to continue. Those activated people have to continue saving lives, because if we bring down the numbers of abortions, we are weakening the whole abortion industry, including their propaganda arm. by saving lives, we're not only saving those lives, we are making it easier to end abortion altogether.
The next question comes from JP, who is from Hanford, California. What do you see as being the best ways to promote unity among pro-life organizations and sects?
Yes, getting to know who they are in the first place. I often recommend to local pro-life groups, find out who the other groups are in your own city and your own county, and schedule time to get together with them. If a pro-life group is having an event, go to it. If they're having a conference, don't say, oh, well, that's what the other group is doing, I'm not involved in that. If you're a pro-life person in that community, that event is for you too, even if they might not know how to reach you. Go to it. In other words, we have to step out of ourselves, out of the normal circle of our activities, and make time to get to know the other people. That's the basis of the unity. Because as we get to know each other, then it's going to be very clear, first of all, that we're interested in each other. And secondly, it'll become very clear how we can collaborate, how we can strengthen each other's efforts, because that's ultimately what the unity is all about.
Priests for Life has been, and you mentioned this earlier in the interview, has been pro the use of graphic pictures of abortion. I think most pro-life people, are somewhat pro, but it becomes more nuanced when they start trying to figure out, how should we use graphic pictures, in what ways, when, and where, and so give us kind of your take on, it's not just that graphic pictures are important. How should they be used, when, where, and how?
Well, one of the rules is inform or pre-warn your audience that they're about to see them. So if it's in a presentation, obviously you tell people what it is that's about to be shown well before it's shown. Give them an opportunity to turn away, close their eyes, leave the room temporarily, particularly if they have very young children with them and the parents don't want the children to see these things, they can take them out of the room. So by giving people that option, you're showing a respect for them. The message will be better received. If you're doing it out on a public demonstration, then very often what we and other groups do is to have warning signs ahead of time. So if there's a Face the Truth tour, for example, where people line the streets and show these pictures, the first signs that people will see coming from any direction are, warning graphic visuals ahead. And then this gives people an opportunity, again, to look away or to even take another route if that's what they want to do and if that's an option. So you're always showing respect in that way for people. A second aspect of the manner in which we show these pictures is that we always have, together with the pictures, the offer of forgiveness and healing. As you also mentioned, we direct the Rachel's Vineyard ministry and the Silent No More Awareness campaign. And these are ministries based on the urgent call to healing and the infinite riches of God's mercy. So we are ministers of truth, which includes showing and exposing abortion. We are ministers of mercy, which of course is part and parcel of the truth. And when people know that forgiveness is there, that we are here not to condemn, not to judge, not to beat people down, but rather to lift them up and give them new hope, then again, they receive the message with a more open mind, because they say, okay, these people are not against us. We're not quite sure what they're trying to say, but they're not against us, so they'll listen a little bit better. So those are two of various elements we have to keep in mind when we do show the pictures.
Let me ask you about an issue that pro-life people don't talk about very often: assisted suicide and euthanasia. As you said, you've been involved. You're very, very involved with the Terry Schiavo case, and it's a lot of pro-life people. I think we're focused on abortion, and kind of rightfully so. This is where it should be most obvious to the rest of the community that this is wrong, and this is in some ways maybe where the most lives are being lost. But we still need to be aware of assisted suicide and euthanasia, and maybe be doing certain things about it. So what is your view on that? What do you think pro-life people should be doing about end-of-life issues, and why?
It's first of all, understanding that it's another side of the same coin, because if people say, my choice, my life, then eventually they're going to say, my choice, my death. If choice is more important than life, then both life and death are at will. And this is what the myth of euthanasia and assisted suicide is, that we can control the timing and manner of our own death. You know, when people talk to me about the right to die, you know what I say to them? Don't worry, you won't miss out on it. And this is something that, you know, we have to think about this. We do not have a claim on death. It has a claim on us. So when we look at what this right to die movement is really all about, what we're seeing is it is just like abortion is, an expression of despair. And think about it for a moment. Oh, I can't bring a child into this world, as if the world is such a dark and hopeless place that nobody should be there. Nobody should go there anymore, you know. And then the other side of that coin is, well, the world has become so intolerable, at least my world, so burdensome, I've got to get out of it. So I can't bring a child into it. I can't stay in it. I have to get out of it. There you have abortion and euthanasia. What do we have to do to deal with both of these tragedies? We have to infuse hope. That's the hope. Hope allows us to say yes to life. Hope allows us to see meaning even in suffering. There's a beautiful saying that someone once wrote that says that the false God transforms suffering into violence, but the true God transforms violence into suffering. And this is where we see the power of the cross. Our suffering, whether it's the confusion of a woman who's pregnant and doesn't know what to do about the child, or someone who has a terminal illness, our suffering can be a moment to embrace hope. And that's what gives us the strength to say yes to life. How do we do that? We have to spend time with people. Just like a key to ending abortion is reaching out and spending time and being present to the pregnant mother, so also with euthanasia, reaching out, starting in our families, and spending time with those who are elderly, those who are ill, especially terminal illness, those who are dying. Make them remember they're not ignored, they're not forgotten, and they don't have any less value just because they might not be able to communicate as easily or to get around as readily as the rest of us.
Father Pavone is the National Director of Priests for Life. You can visit they've got a great web. One of the pro-life websites that has a lot of information there, and it looks good. It's really real. You can spend days at priestsforlife.org. You can visit them at priestsforlife.org. Father Frank, may God bless your ministry, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you both. Thanks for having me.
I want to remind our listeners, if you want to help us keep the show going, if this has been helpful to you, you can donate to us, and you can visit all the other episodes that we've ever published at prolifepodcast.net. That's our show. Have a great week.
You've been watching Life Report, Pro-Life Talk, Real World Answers. Life Report is produced by Right to Life of Central California. Visit their website at fresnoprolife.org.